Yeah, but we can roll with it. You know what? We'll fix it in post.
We'll do it live.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Tangled Crossroads. That's right, we're tangling it up yes again in the crossroads. So I am joined today with...
My name is Amador.
And we also have a small guest. Not a small guest. I don't know the size of our guest. We have a guest that's going to be joining us today.
Our guest today is Enigma.
Hello.
Or as he's sometimes referred to as Enigma Craft. He's a Minecraft YouTuber and Twitch creator like Kit and I.
Yeah.
Nice to be here.
And we tricked him into joining us today, so... He's going to be one of the players in the eventual campaign that we start with the Tangled Crossroads, which we're going to decide what we're actually going to do at some point, but...
Yeah, which we will have, basically our topic today is Session 0. We will actually have to have one of those at some point so that we can go over the rules for that.
So Session 0. You know, I've never really been a fan of Session 0s because I am ADHD and don't get to play a whole lot, and so spending an entire day just planning everything out just always seemed like, it's like, oh, I want to play the game though. As somebody who I'm assuming is a huge fan of the Session 0, go ahead and try to convince me about the goodness of the zeros of the sessions.
Session 0 for me isn't really about planning. When I run a Session 0 for my folks, I've done most of the planning ahead of time. I have a player's book that I hand out to my players, either digitally or even physically, which details out the world and like any homebrew rules and expectations and stuff like that. So in my Session 0, I basically do an introduction to the campaign and the world. I go through and read the expectations that I have as a DM for my players, and then the expectations that my players can have of me as a DM. And we go through those, and, you know, if we need to talk about them, then we can and make some adjustments. We talk about, you know, what topics are going to be off limits, what topics, you know, we really want in the game, and we kind of review any home rules that we've kind of decided on. And then usually towards the end of my Session 0s, we actually kind of play a quick little opening where we introduce the characters.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
That's kind of Session 0 for me.
That actually seems very useful to have in front of a thing, because then you know the expectations of everything, and you're not surprised whenever somebody's like, hey, maybe don't do that thing that you're doing. Like, people frown upon that. Maybe let's not.
Right, like I'm deathly afraid of spiders, you know, a player might say, and so we don't put spiders in the game. Or we make them fun and fuzzy.
They're the fuzzy spiders.
You know, that's kind of what I look at for Session 0. It's, you know, what tools and tones and things, you know, do we have in the game? I expect you to be on time. You know, if you're going to be late, let me know, you know, things like that. And, you know, if we're going to be missing one player, we'll still probably play, you know, but if we're down 2, well, we'll have to figure something else out. You know, things like that.
So I know another thing with Session 0s is that house rules is usually discussed at that time. Is that something that you usually do?
Yep. So some of the house rules that I use are for crits instead of, you know, like if your damage dice is 1d10 instead of rolling 2d10, I usually have you roll 1d10 and then add 10 to it. So I max out the first die roll, because it's really depressing to have a crit that is significantly lower than what a normal hit would be.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I do some house rules with healing potions. If you take a full action to drink a healing potion, you get the max health out of it. But as a bonus action, you can drink a healing potion and then roll the dice for it.
So when establishing the house rules, do you have them written down somewhere so that it's easy to access, just in case, like, oh, I forgot about the potion thing?
Yep, they're in the player document that I hand out.
Oh.
I basically have, because of the fact that I run a homebrew world, I basically publish to my players a PDF file that is a player's document that has things like the expectations in it. It has the house rules that I normally use in it, and has some basic lore of the game, of the game world.
That's really cool.
And then it's also got character sheets in it, some cheat sheet charts for, like, you know, basic equipment and stuff like that. I've usually got a character questionnaire in there that I ask my players to fill out that usually asks backstory stuff that helps them when they're making their character backstory. It helps them kind of like figure out what they're going to do. What is the history of this character? And so these questions are designed to trigger those responses and help them kind of brainstorm the history of their character up to the point where they've become an adventurer.
And usually in your campaigns, do you start with them becoming an adventurer? Like that's the very beginning of it, is that they've just become an adventurer? Or do you usually like I guess the question is, do you like to start at level 1 or level 3? And if it's level 3, do you have them explain the backstory of how they got to level 3?
I usually start at level 3.
Okay.
Unless I've got like really brand new players, and then I'll start at level 1 for them. But for level 3, I don't necessarily ask for like, give me every detail of how you got to level 3. It's more like, what got you to the city that we're starting in? What are some key moments in the past few years that, what is something really good that you did in the last, what is something you failed at doing recently? What secrets do you have? Things like that. Do you have, are your parents alive, or are they, passed away like most characters in D&D games?
Just like all the superheroes. So you said you like to plan everything beforehand, and so really your session zeros aren't really like a planning phase, but you're also talking about like backstories and everything. Are you integrating the backstories into the campaign after you planned it?
When I plan out a campaign, I have kind of an overall arc. So like the campaign that I'm running now, I had a general idea of the main story parts for the campaign. And then usually I run my session 0 like a couple of weeks before we actually have our first session. And so I can take and weave the character stories into my overall arc so it all ties together.
Okay, that's really cool.
I mean, most of the time my players have their backstories, or at least the basics of their backstories, figured out before they get to the table. Because, I'm usually planning out a campaign, months in advance.
And what happens whenever you have that problem child that like doesn't plan anything out and then gets to the table?
Well, that's what the questionnaire is kind of designed to do. It's to help them kind of work through that. And even if the only backstory I get is the answers to that questionnaire, I could work.
Oh, okay. How many questions are on it?
I think it's 20.
20 questions? Do you have an example of some of the questions that are on it?
Give me a second and I can pull it up.
Sure. Jeopardy
theme song in there.
It's not copyrighted anymore, is it?
Probably. Although as badly as we sung it probably wouldn't.
I'd be like, I have no idea what it is that you're singing. Normally we would sue, but now we just feel bad.
Okay, so here are some of the questions that are in this character questionnaire. Describe your family's relationship, or describe your character's relationship with your family. Do you have any living parents, siblings, or other close relatives? There's a question about your mentor or influence. Did your character have a mentor or someone who has significantly influenced their life? How did this person shape your character today? Who are your character's closest allies, and who are their greatest enemies? How did these relationships develop? Describe 2 or 3 key personality traits that define your character. Are they brave, cautious, optimistic, or pessimistic? So those are just kind of some of the examples. What is your character's current overarching goal or aspiration? What do they hope to achieve in the foreseeable future? So that those type of questions give me a basis to kind of take what the player and the character wants to accomplish and weave it into whatever story I want to tell.
And that probably helps newer players as well, because they don't have to get so bogged down on the details that they can just be like, okay, here's the main points that I need to get out of my backstory, and kind of like ease them into role-playing a little bit better, I would think. Where did you get those questions from? Are they ones that you just made up, or did you find them in any location, or where's it just?
So I watch a lot of Matt Colville's videos on being a DM and stuff like that, and I think I originally got the idea from him as to what questions I put in. It's a mixture of things that he asked players, and it's a mixture of things that I've kind of put together from other sources and just kind of mixed and matched.
Okay, cool.
There's a link in the Discord to it.
Awesome. So with new players and everything, do we talk about like rule familiarity and any learning curves in this session?
We can if there are questions. I usually don't bring it up, mostly because most of the players that I've played with have played D&D for quite some time. I can and have run for new players, and generally in those situations, I'm not a DM that like sticks to the rules so strongly that, you know, I want I want my players to have fun. And so if they describe something cool to me that they want to try, I'll let them try. I'll let them roll dice for it. They may not succeed. They may get eaten by a mimic when they try to knock on the door, but
But at least they tried.
yep, I'll let them try.
I know one of the things that people seem to like to talk about is leveling. How do you prefer to do the leveling? Do you actually like to crunch out the experience points, or do you do a milestone leveling whenever you DM?
I do milestone leveling. I'm not a crunchy DM, so
Which makes sense from what you said earlier.
I find bookkeeping to be tedious and something that you do in EVE Online, and that's about it.
Good old Eve Online.
Spreadsheets, the MMO.
There was a tabletop game that was playing that was a Star Trek tabletop game with spaceships. And
Yeah.
like at the end of each turn, there was like this section of it where you have to like fill out this form and it feels like you're doing space taxes.
Oh no.
And I was like, oh my God, I have to figure my space 401k out and get it to align with everything. Oh no.
That kind of sounds like the game Paranoia, which is an RPG that it's like a dystopian future, highly comedic. Think Monty Python in space. And like if you want your character to be able to do something that is like outside, outside of what your character normally would do, you have to fill out this form for it and give it to the storyteller, and then you roll
Oh,
dice for
oh wow.
it. But I mean, it's the whole idea of it's like there's this whole 1984 type mastermind kind of feel to it, and it's pure comedy.
That's kind of cool. I don't think I've ever played that one.
It can be kind of crazy. I've done some one shots with it, but
So I think you mentioned this last time, but you said that you prefer role playing over the combat part of it. Is this something that you would actually bring up during the session 02? That's part of the like setting expectations of the campaign, I would guess.
yeah, it's part of the expectations. I generally ask my players what kind of balance they want for it. And while I may prefer a more role play centric game, if my players want dungeon crawls and hack and slash, I'll give them that.
Oh, that's very accommodating. Oh,
I
whenever you're playing online, does it change your session 0 at all?
The session zero itself doesn't really change, other than I might add, discussions about, which virtual tabletop we're going to use, whether it's going to be Roll20 or something else.
Is
What
Roll20 the one you prefer to use?
Roll20 is the easiest one that I know of to use. I've not really used Fantasy Grounds all that much, although I think I have it, but I haven't really used it all that much.
Does everybody have to have Roll20, or is it just one person? Because that one's a paid one, right?
So there is a free version that you can use as a DM, but none of your players have to pay for Roll20.
Okay. It's only one person, the DM, that has to pay for it if they want it. Which I guess you could also discuss in your session zeros, like, hey, I'm gonna spend this money on it. Can y'all back me some money so that we can all use it together?
Like if you want a lot of the bells and whistles for Roll20 that you need a subscription for, then you might bring that up and talk about cost sharing and stuff like that. I do use D&D Beyond, and I have most of the books purchase through D&D Beyond, but I also have physical books. I mainly use it so that I can share the books that I have with my players, so they don't necessarily have to buy them if they don't want to, especially with a new player. So you've said you don't necessarily like Session Zero. Can you tell me why?
So typically, I'm not the biggest fan of Session Zero, is because, which I will clarify that at the beginning, I was kind of joking a little bit about the Session Zero thing, because I do see its purpose, and I do think it's actually very important to do a Session Zero, but I usually don't get to play that a whole lot, and whenever we do the Session Zero of a game, it just feels like an entire day that I'm missing of playing. And
I see.
And well, it's like, okay, I can finally play. And then it's like, okay, we're only doing Session Zero. It's like, no, so I have to wait another month before I can actually play? No.
I can understand that. The excitement of wanting to jump into the game right away. And especially if you're only playing it once a month. Man, I can't. Been there, done that, don't like it.
Mm-hmm. Man, with one of my groups, I was actually trying to get working. So we were doing like once a month, and we're like, okay, we're just going to plan an entire full day to do it. And then we would get it one day in. We'd actually do the Session Zero basically at the very beginning of the first day. And then halfway through, we would switch over to just playing the first part of the campaign, which then, satisfied my ADHD. But we discovered that was causing issues, because then it's like, okay, we have to plan a full day for this. And so we came up with the idea of doing like, okay, we're going to try to play once a week, only for like an hour or two, which that worked, except for one of the people we had was very flaky and then made it so it was really hard to play. So we ended up playing for an hour or two once a month rather than an hour or two once a week like we were planning.
Ouch. Yeah. I guess I kind of live with a little bit of privilege in that regard, because I have a pretty solid gaming group. One of the advantages of at one point owning a gaming store is I've got a pretty solid gaming group. I mean, I DM twice a week and I play once a week.
Nice. Yeah, I live in Texas, as previously mentioned, and it's big, and so like all my friends are scattered around, so it's like, okay, who's gonna be the one that's driving 3 hours to get to the game? And so a lot of people are like, okay, I can't really do that, and it's like, no.
I did that for a little while. Shortly after I got out of the Air Force and came home, a group of my old high school buddies decided we were going to get together like once a month down home and play some Vampire the Masquerade. So it was like a 2-hour drive for me to go home once a month to play in this game.
Wow, that's a long drive.
Yep.
Hopefully the campaign was fun and worth it.
Oh, yeah, it was fun. I played a Malkavian with multiple personalities, and I didn't have any control over when I changed personalities. The storyteller did.
Oh, wow.
And so our setting was local. So, like, our group was roaming around the Southridge Mall in Des Moines.
Oh, wow.
Looking for some werewolves. And my character changed personalities, got freaked out because they were surrounded by a bunch of vampires and called the police. Really broke the masquerade.
Oh no. That sounds like a fun campaign thing. How would you like set that up? Would that be like one of those things where you'd be like, okay, I have a character plan. Can you implement this into your game? Is that how you bring up that conversation?
That was basically it. Yeah, I sat down with a storyteller and was like, I have this idea for this character. And so I sat down, we made the character sheet up, and then we kind of sit down and I came up with like 20 different personalities. And they all had to be kind of personalities I thought I could play. And then, we came up with some like general triggers for when they would change. But I really kind of left that up to the storyteller. And so I gave him this list of these personalities, and he worked it into the story. It was like, you're in the basement of this mall, you're looking around. Oh, by the way, you're now this personality. I'm like, oh, where'd all these vampires come from? What's going on?
That's really cool. So if you have any crazy ideas for your character, that would probably be the best time to bring it up would be in the Session Zero or before it even?
It depends on how complicated the crazy idea is. I mean, if it's not as crazy as that Malkavian, Session Zero would be a good place to bring it up. If it's something that's going to be complicated, you might want to like throw the idea out to the DM ahead of time so they know that what you're coming to the table with, but you'll probably work out the details during the Session Zero. I also like to go over some of the world a little bit, because since I play in a homebrew world, I like to kind of give my players, a bit of background, especially since I run multiple campaigns in the world. I kind of give them both a player's perspective and a character's perspective of the world, kind of give them a little history.
That makes sense. So if you were doing like a module too, I would assume that you would probably do a very similar thing with it, is try to explain a little bit of the setting that the module is based in.
If I'm running a published adventure, I usually don't run a session 0.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, but I can't remember the last time I actually ran a published adventure. It's been a long time. I mean, even when they had the game store, I ran basically all of my D&D sessions for folks in my homebrew world.
Oh, wow. That makes sense.
If
If you already have it all written out and everything, might as well use the homebrew world.
I mean, I have run Ravenloft, I have run, the Curse of Strahd, and I have run The Rise of Tiamat for folks. But it was like when those books first came out, and it was before I really had my world put together, and we didn't do session 0s. It was like, I'm going to run Curse of Strahd, make a character for it. And that's what they did. I mean, and most of those books, they start you out at level 1 anyway.
Yeah, a lot of those books start at level 1. Do you use any ideas from the books? Or
I will sometimes. I will pull some ideas for some books. Or like if I'm running a one-shot, like here a few weeks ago, the Saturday group that I run, a couple of their players couldn't make it, but the rest of them still wanted to play. So I pulled out Tomb of Horrors. And was like, I'm going to run Tomb of Horrors for your current characters that are in the campaign. So instead of doing a session 0, it was like, and we've kind of made it kind of an in-campaign joke, is like, this is just a nightmare that's happened while you were having your long rest.
pulled a Dallas on them. It's all a dream.
They did die repeatedly.
Oh no.
Tomb of Horrors.
Tomb of Horrors is a fun, scary thing. Is it the reprint of the Tomb of Horrors, or are you using OG Tomb? I think they reprinted it, right?
Yeah, they reprinted it for Tales from the Yawning Portal.
Yes,
and and that's what I was running for them, just because it was quick and easy for me to pull off the shelf.
Ah, that makes sense.
I mean, I have the old school Tomb of Horrors, but I'd have to convert it to 5th edition. So, since it already is in the book, I just ran it that way.
So I'm going to change things up a little bit. And Enigma, as a newer player, how do you feel about Session Zeros? Have you ran it in all... You said you were in 3 campaigns, I believe?
Well, 2 so far. This is going to be the third one.
Okay. Did both of them have a Session 0?
Yes, actually, both of them did. I actually thought it was, for being a new player, it was quite helpful, especially since I really didn't know the mechanics of the game or anything like that. It was getting kind of the ground rules of how it worked and how we should think our characters out, not like just going in there and throwing something at the last minute. So it helped me be a little more methodical.
Okay.
We're trying to figure out how I want my character to be.
That makes sense. If it was like Amador running it, he was helping you with the creation of the character itself at that time?
I believe the first one was Karis. No, I think both of you helped me with that one. You and Karis helped me with the first one.
Yeah, in the first campaign, Karis wanted to have at least one really experienced player to kind of help her out with getting things set up. So I joined that campaign to kind of be a mentor, so that, if we needed a split task where she was working with one player and I was working with another, we could, or just helping bounce ideas off of each other to kind of help people, or, if one of us forgot something, the other could bring it up.
That's really cool. Is there any other games that you would like to play other than D&D?
Really, I've always wanted to try D&D. It's been something I've been wanting to try for years, and I've never had a group of people to help me with that. So I've kind of just left it in the dark. But other games, are you talking about like tabletop games?
Yeah, like other tabletop games, roleplay wise. I would assume that more than like Warhammer or something like that. But although there is a tabletop version of Warhammer.
Trying to think, I can't think of very many other tabletop games, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I don't get out very much. I just work and play Minecraft.
Oh, I know that. Okay. Would you like to try a modern version or like a space version, or do you like the fantasy?
Really, I'm kind of okay with anything. It's just, it helps kind of break away from reality for a little bit, and kind of a stress reliever, if that makes sense. You got to take it out on imaginary creatures, catch them on fire or something.
So what kind of engineers do you like, Enigma? Obviously, you
Yeah.
like fantasy, but you, kind of sci-fi do you like?
Not sci-fi. I do like sci-fi quite a bit. I've thought about a Western one, but that's would be a little hard to do, I think.
Actually, there is a really good. It's kind of old at this point, but there is kind of a Western slash horror game called Deadlands.
Oh, Deadlands. I haven't heard that name in a long time.
Why is that name
Yeah,
so familiar?
Deadlands is set in the 1860s to the 1880s in an alternate version of the United States where the Civil War doesn't end. There is this material called ghost rock that was discovered when there was a giant earthquake in California that like shattered the coastline. And ghost rock can be used in all kinds of contraptions and machines. So it's got a. If you've ever seen the old TV show or the movie Wild Wild West, you can sometimes have contraptions like that giant spider that's walking around at the end of that movie. They have steam tanks, so there's a little bit of steampunk involved, but there's a lot of horror to it. A lot of times you're fighting ghosts. A player can play an undead character. You know, hucksters can actually. A huckster is essentially your gambler. They cast spells by drawing cards from a poker deck, and they're essentially playing poker with an evil spirit in order to cast their spells.
That is actually quite interesting.
So
that's
Deadlands.
I do like steampunk things, but that's just me in general.
Steampunk's great.
You haven't seen some of my builds on Minecraft to go along with that.
There's games for like Star Trek. There's games for Star Wars. Another idea for a Western sci-fi would be Firefly. There is an RPG for Firefly.
That's one that I've always heard about and thought about getting, but I've actually always wanted to run a Firefly campaign too, where it's like a group of people on a ship.
I did love the show. I just hated the fact they canceled it.
Right?
Oh,
One season. Why just one season?
and it was going good too. And never mind. I'm not going to go on that rant.
The studio messed them up, or not the studio. It was oh man, I don't remember what channel it aired on, but it was the channel that messed them up.
I think it was. Oh man, now I forgot it. I had it in my head for a second.
Yeah, I don't remember what network it was on.
I remember the channel. And that's about it. Channel 11. I'm in Oklahoma, so.
So for a Western, I think one of my favorite systems, it only usually works for like a one-shot thing, but it's called Dread.
Oh, yeah, I've played Dread.
And you use a Jenga tower as your dice, basically.
Yep.
And if the Jenga tower falls over, you die. But it builds that tension in it. And I think that would actually work really well with a Western. Because you like every single gunfight you're in, you're in closer to a chance of getting shot and killed. And so you're like, oh man, if I accidentally push this tower over, it's going to be the end of everything. Which I love that system because it builds the dread every single time you do something. The tension gets built up a lot.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting way of doing it.
I've got a friend that likes to run Dread sessions, and we've played Dread in all sorts of genres, everything from sci-fi and modern to westerns and fantasy. If you've seen the movie The Lady Killers with Tom Hanks in it, where it's this group, it's like set in the 60s or 70s, and this group of bank robbers basically rent this basement from this old lady, and they're digging a tunnel from her basement to the riverboat casino vault so they can rob it. And throughout the course of the movie, the bank robbers keep dying through a bunch of accidents. And it's kind of funny the way it happens because this woman, she's very religious. She's very stoic and conservative, and she seems to be totally oblivious of what's going on. But there's so many close calls in it. It's kind of funny. I've run a Dread session of that where all the players were like the bandits, and they all died at the end.
Yeah, one that I thought would be great is a Dread session that is Western. I think it would work, but another one that I was thinking of is you're a captain of a starship and like you play Dread, and it's more of like Star Trek, the first generation episode 13, I think it was, where they have that Romulan standoff.
Oh, that would be interesting.
And then it's like, okay, so you're building up, and if the tower falls over, then you end up starting an international war with the Romulans.
I think Dread would work really good for the Expanse.
Oh, yeah.
Like some of the early episodes where they're dealing with that proto-molecule thing.
Dread's just a good system. Everybody should play it at some point.
Yep.
It's just hard to play online.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how you would play Dread online.
I don't think you can. Maybe like draw cards, like, okay, if you get the ace.
Actually, there might be a way. Yeah, that would be kind of cool. Is you get that tension just built up.
Mm-hmm. Oh, maybe playing it with a deck of cards for a Western, that might be thematic. And like, you like shuffle the deck and it's like, hey, if you get an ace, something bad happens. Not necessarily like death, but
if Tabletop Simulator had a Jenga tower.
oh, I would die instantly. I'm terrible at Tabletop Simulator. I like shake all over the place. It's like, not only did you lose the Jenga tower, we lost all the pieces somehow on this virtual game. So, Enigma, have you ever wanted to be a DM? Or are you just having fun being a player?
Right now, I think I'm having more fun being a player, especially since the lack of knowledge on things. I think it'd be better if I learned a lot more before I ever thought about being a DM, because I don't want to steer somebody in the wrong direction, or there's not really, well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, and that was my main thing. I'd hate to try and do it with the lack of knowledge I have right now, because I know some of it, but I got a long ways to go.
And you haven't felt that learning D&D has been like too daunting for you?
There's some things. It depends on like where you read at. I know there's like all different versions of D&D. You have the updates and stuff like that. I know some of them don't quite go together. I can't remember which ones were ones that didn't. Like change the rules or something. But being up on top of that. But other than that, it's been fairly straightforward, except for roll 20 not liking me and messing up my sheet. Does that happen the last time?
Oh, that reminds me of a question. 5e 2014 or 5e 2024?
Okay, so I haven't played 5e 2024 yet. But everything that I've read on it, I am not the biggest fan of, because I just feel like it's not needed.
I would agree that a lot of it isn't needed, although I think there are some things that they kind of tweak that I do like. I will tell you that it's a table that I run. I let my players use either version.
Okay.
So, like, if they're playing a caster and they're going through their spell lists, if they like the 2024 version of a spell more than the 2014, I'll let them use it.
It was created in a way that you can do that, if my understanding is correct. That the whole point was kind of it's kind of like an upgrade, but you don't necessarily have to use it. You can use your old characters in the new system in quotation marks, because it's more of a it's almost like a 3.5 rather than a 4.
Yeah.
So it's like a 5.5 6. What number are we on? Are we on 5?
And when it comes to older editions, I'll pull stuff from older editions. I won't use Thaco, but
I want Thaco. That's my favorite part of the game.
But I'll certainly pull, things, especially monsters and magic items. I'll pull those from older editions.
So whenever you do that, since the HP and everything is kind of like different between the things and the AC is different, do you just kind of like, oh, I'm going to pull this monster from back in the day and it only has like 12 HP, but that doesn't seem like enough. It should have more. Do you just like play until it's like, oh yeah, it's probably dead now?
So I quite often modify creatures in encounters, or I'll make homebrew versions of creatures. But I'll pull abilities and stuff from other creatures, just because a lot of my players have basically memorized the monster manual.
That's rude.
So I'm like, I don't want them to necessarily know that what this goblin can do. So I'm gonna add some abilities to it, or I'm gonna, I want to be able to use goblins at higher levels, so I got to beef them up or, things like that.
You said that I didn't hit, but according to this book that I'm holding, it says his AC is 11. So
That's what the book said. My world's different. My world, goblins are stronger than dragons. No, I'm kidding.
Oh my god. So in Session 0, do you talk about like what snacks that the player should bring the DM?
Well, bribery with food is always a thing at my table.
Oh, good.
I usually tell them what I dislike, and I leave it at that for them to surprise me.
So what is your favorite D&D snack?
I'm not sure I have a favorite D&D snack, although I will sometimes irritate my players by bringing a package of saltine crackers, which are extremely loud when I chew.
Oh, I think I would die. I have mesophobia, so like noises are terrible for me.
Last week, one of the players brought cupcakes.
Ooh, I like cupcakes.
One of the other players was having a birthday, so
Oh, that's cool. And this is your younger group?
this was actually the Thursday group. And these are
okay.
The person who was having a birthday was turning 30.
Yeah, younger, right?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, sure. I vaguely remember 30.
So is there any other like big thoughts that you have on Session 0? Things that you absolutely want to bring up whenever you're playing a Session 0?
I think we've kind of covered most of it. I think it's important if you're going to do a session 0, get out the expectations for both yourself as a DM and for the players. Talk about homebrew rules. If you're playing in a homebrew world, you definitely need to give out some lore so the players kind of understand, what they need to, what other characters know about the world, things like that. Making sure that you know what topics are off the table. I would tell you that there are some themes in my homebrew world that some people probably wouldn't like. Some things that go on in certain areas of the world, and if they don't, well, we don't go to those places.
Whenever you run a campaign, is there things that you aren't comfortable with without getting into too much detail, I would say?
No, I'm pretty open to whatever my players are open to. I will say that as discrimination occurs, things along those lines. I will, as long as it's in game and it's not being used to, if I feel like my players are basically weaponizing it against each other, then I'll put it into it. That stuff is generally weeded out during the planning process before we even get to the session 0.
Yeah, that's part of the vetting the player section of it, I would assume, to make sure everybody vibes with each other. Well, cool. I think you convinced me that session 0 is actually a good thing, and maybe we should do it.
You can always get a little bit of playtime in a session 0.
Yeah, that's the main thing that I like, is the having a session 0 where at the end you get like something in, so you're like, okay, I felt like that I was actually able to do something instead of sitting back and not doing anything.
Roll some dice and kind of introduce character ideas and stuff like that.
And for a nice example of what a session 0 might look like, we are going to run a session 0 for the campaign that we're eventually going to be doing, and it will be on this same channel, so you don't even have to like worry about finding a different podcast thing anywhere. You just listen here, and eventually one of the episodes will come up, and periodically you'll see the campaign episodes that we'll be running, and hopefully we can give you a little bit of insight on some of it, and like maybe the thoughts after the episode happened of, oh, here's what I was planning, some of that stuff, so maybe you can get a good idea of how to be a better DM, how to be a better player, some of those things.
So I do have a question for you, Kit.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to play or DM?
I always much prefer being a player rather than a DM, but I'm always willing to DM if I need to.
So if I DM, do you have an idea for a character?
Not yet, but I would like to know the world first before I would choose a character.
I know Enigma's been passing around some ideas.
Do you have any that you want to pass around with somebody who might also be a player?
Well, one of them was a necromancer.
Ooh.
I've never done that before. I think that might be kind of interesting.
Necromancer
Depending
could
on
be
the,
fun.
yeah, depending on if like we have vampires and stuff like that. I don't know if that would work on those. They're the undead. The other one was a kind of a skeleton wizard.
So you're going all spellsies.
I found out I'm not as good as a drunk pirate. That was my last character. I did not do very well at that.
I thought you did okay.
Yeah, wasn't bad.
What was your
I just
first
wish I could
character?
have gotten it. It was a warlock, which was
Oh,
based off my World of Warcraft character.
nice.
There was a couple ideas I had. I don't know. I think about summoning like creatures. So I think that would be under the wizard category.
Yes, summoning
Wizard-
is a wizard thing, or a sorcerer. I think can do summoning, but I think some of the best ones are wizard summonings because you have like summon monster 1 through 11.
Yeah.
So wizards can summon. I think sorcerers can do summoning, but it's a lot less. Druids have the ability to summon
druids, that's a good one.
Creatures, depending on which circle they take. So a lot of that's going to be dependent on the subclass you take.
Yeah, druids they have a full on class of just summoning things and friends with animals, or you can go the route where you turn into animals.
I think that's a route that Karis went this last trip.
Yeah,
She can go back and forth.
yeah. Karis, we kind of tweaked her wild shape abilities and gave her a lot of freedom into when she could shift. So we kind of homebrewed the druid in that regard, and she spent more time in animal form than she did in humanoid form.
Oh, so speaking of Necromancer, the last campaign that I was running, one of the other people that's going to be joining us, he was playing a Necromancer as well. But one of the biggest issues that he had was whenever you start at level 1, you have 0 necromancy spells, basically. You can't like summon a skeleton or raise the dead until like level 3, I think. Or maybe it's even later in that. So I homebrewed a entire spell for him that was like lesser summoning or lesser raised dead, so that he would actually be able to do part of what his skill was.
That sounds fun.
And it made it so that like the skeletons were like a lot weaker, and you can only do like 1 or 2 instead of like 3 or 4. I forget how it actually worked. I was pretty happy with it because it made it so that my player could actually do what they wanted.
So Enigma, would you be using your undead summons to mostly for combat, or would you be having them do like household chores and stuff like that?
Ooh. Probably household chores right now, but that's beside the point. Yeah, I'd say household chores. But I think it's a level 5 is where they get the necromancing, where they actually can do anything with it.
Level 5? Yeah, I remember it was like really late into it, and we were starting a campaign. I was actually running... Oh man, it was out of a book. Which book was it?
Let's see.
It's one of the books where you start on the island. It's pretty cool. In Shrod?
Oh, Cholt?
Scholt, yeah.
Okay, I know. I can't think of the name of the book off the top of my head, but I know exactly what you're talking about. That campaign is a successor to the Tomb of Horrors.
Yeah, at the very end, there's that super long dungeon that's really cool that I didn't get to yet. But but that whole campaign, I think, is one of the better written modules, I would say.
So I ran that campaign for a group of friends, and when they got to that there's a city before you get into that big dungeon, and in that city is a T-Rex that has the ability to cast spells. When my party encountered it, they didn't know about the spell casting ability, and one of my players attacked it and then disengaged to get away from it. So I had the T-Rex misty step to him, and I critted him twice.
Wow, nice.
I just want to see it holding like a little wand or something. I don't know why. That's the first thing that came to my mind.
Well, is there anything else that either of y'all would like to add before we end this episode? I think it's about that time.
Tomb of Annihilation is the name of that adventure, by the way.
Oh, Doom Annihilation. That is what it is. Oh, which funny thing about his character too is like the Tomb of Annihilation. Whenever the whole thing is that it starts out that all the people who have died previously are dying because something is going on that island. You're sent there to go kind of figure out what's going on. But the Necromancer character ended up actually dying beforehand, and that was part of his backstory. And so I was like, well, this is gonna be a short campaign. But I tweaked it a little bit so that it was starting to get to the point, the slow death, rather than in the midst of the slow death. Session 0, bringing it back to the topic that we started with. As I mentioned before, I think it's a great thing to have, and you'll hopefully get to see a good Session 0 coming up. And I think we had a really good episode.
I do feel like Session Zeros are a good tool. Definitely you need to plan it out ahead of time so you kind of know what you're wanting to bring up. You treat it like any other game session and go in having kind of a rough plan and use it for the tool that it's designed to be.
And just like any tool, if you use it correctly, it's great. If you use it wrong, it's not so great.
Very true.
And we will see y'all next time.
See you next time.